Madam Renu Sharma, shall we start or we'll wait for a few minutes?
Sir, a few more minutes, sir. They are joining.
Okay.
Sir, I would like to see whether you are able to share your slides or not, sir.
I think the slides are going to be shared from your side.
That
Okay.
this our
Okay, sir.
Vivekananda will be sharing, or you can
Sure,
share.
sure.
Yes, he
Vivek will be sharing, sir. Okay.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Vivek, sir, please share the slide so that I can check whether it's coming or not.
Yes, madam. I have already checked.
Okay, that's great. So we can start now. They'll be joining, sir.
Okay.
Yes, please. Yeah, please do. Yeah.
So, friends, very good evening to all of you. Today, we have with us in this 49th distinguished lecture, Professor Sunil Manohar Sastry. And he is from my alma mater, IIT Kharagpur, but he is now in UK and in Pune. He is a consultant, educator, and speaker in ocean and environmental governance. Professor Sastry actually did his bachelor's in mining engineering from IIT Kharagpur. Then actually he has gone into this one. So his brief biodata is Professor Sunil Manohar Sastry is a consultant, educator, and speaker in ocean and environmental governance. He found his passion in Peshim in Marybas in 1982 under the tolerance of Elizabeth Mann Borges, and has since made in his mission. He is best known for his masterclass and Posant analysis. Sunil has attended at various times the Indian Institute of Technology Kharagpur, International Ocean Institute Madras, Malta, RWTS Aachen University, Germany, Dalhousie University in Canada, London School of Economics at UK, and Harvard Kennedy School, USA. Supported throughout by prestigious scholarship since he graduated from IIT Kharagpur in 1977. Sunil has worked as an academic, expert, and researcher in ocean and environment policy and in mining and ocean engineering. He has served on several professional and public bodies as director, governor, or trustee, and is a Rotary Hall Harris Fellow. Sunil was born in India in 1955 and has lived in UK since 1988. Now, so far as actually his abstract of his talk is concerned, his talk is based on philosophy Sunil has adapted, developed, and nurtured throughout the career of over 4 decades, mainly shaped and formed initially under the tutelage of Elizabeth Mann Borges. At the heart of the philosophy is how we might inculcate the idea of one ocean in thought, word, and action. Just as we have only one planet, there is only one ocean and not the 3 or 5 or 7 that our nomenclatures have hitherto defined and described. Having given this reason for his assertion, Sunil moves on to the 3 approaches, namely advice, advocacy, and action, which he had adopted during the latter half of his career as a consultant, educator, speaker, and his related pro bono work. Sunil has introduced 5 crucial issues or rudimentary questions that address the contemporary concern which form the very basis of the existence of our civilization as we have known and imagined. Finally, Sunil talks about solutions in the form of what he calls the 7 pillars of ocean and environmental governance, explaining how each one of us belongs to at least one of these pillars and which we can adopt and support in our own professional and personal lives, and how education and awareness, a pillar which has been entailed in Sunil's entire professional career, may well be looked at as a critical and crucial central pillar. And what is more important is Sunil is actually more in Gandhian in thought and action, and you will see what actually he will do. Now, with this few words about Sunil and also the abstract of the talk that he's going to give, I would like to know if our VC is actually present. Professor Nanda, is he present?
Sir is not there. He's busy with another meetings.
Okay, make a come later. So, with this brief introduction, I will now request Sunil to go ahead with his presentation.
Many thanks, Professor Acharya. Our friendship, our collegiate, existence, and our, interactions go back a long time. I have known you probably, I think, since the mid 70s or something like that.
Yes.
But I came to know you better when I became a lecturer many years after you became a lecturer at IIT Kharagpur. So I became a lecturer in 1981, and that is the time because we used to live quite adjoining near to each other, and our friends were common. So we used to meet each other very often and interact with each other. And I was delighted actually to just come to see you just about end of November. So literally not even 10 days ago, when you were very kind to host us and a group of my friends, including my wife, to your office, the same office where you're sitting now. And we had a very interesting 2-hour discussion. So I'm very grateful to you for that. I'm also grateful to you for organizing this talk. I'm also grateful to you for your warm hospitality and the kind words of introduction now and introducing the topic. So without further ado, I'm very happy to start the talk, and let's take it from there. Thank you. If you can share the screen, please. Thank you.
Share.
So yes. if you show it in the presentation mode.
Yes, the slide is visible.
No, if you can put it in the presentation mode, please.
Full screen, Vivek.
If you put it on this one here, this point at this point. The
F5 press.
The full screen, yeah. Is it coming on the full screen?
No, sir.
I am able to see.
No, full screen.
Vivek, press F5.
Actually, it doesn't matter. We can carry on like this. It's just that you will then be distracted by the next screen. But it doesn't matter. We can carry on like this if we can't have the full screen. So anyway, let me start, and let me start by saying that the topic of the day is one ocean, three approaches, five issues, and seven solutions. And I'll explain to you why I have come with this title in a few further slides. I want you to look at my logo on the top right hand corner. And it says ocean and environmental governance, which is what I do for a living now for the last almost 22 years. And you will see six circles beneath that logo. And the six circles, the first one signifies people. You can see the small circle with a man, woman, maybe, and a child, something like that. So you can see that. The next circle is planet. It's basically showing the earth. The third circle is what I call as prosperity or profit. It shows pounds, shillings, and euros. Pounds, dollars, and euro. No, don't expand it, please. Let it be on the normal size. So then I can't see the whole screen. Excuse me. Please leave it like that. Yeah, thank you. And then the next three circles. So the first three circles are people, planet, and profit. So what my aim has always been is to work on how to balance this three-legged stool. And the next three circles signify equity, justice, and peace. My guru, Professor Elizabeth Van Borghese, she used to always say that, and of course, she had taken this from Mahatma Gandhi, that unless we have equity in the world, we will not have peace in the world. Let's stay on the old slide. We will not have peace in the world, and unless can we stay on the first slide, please? On this slide. Please move the slide when I tell you, because I'm still talking about the first slide, the introductory slide. Yeah. So equity, justice, and peace. So unless we have equity, and equity can be only achieved by balancing these three-legged stool of people, planet, and profit. And once we have that equity achieved, then it can lead to justice, and finally it can lead to peace. So that is the general principle that I'm working on. And I'll explain to you as we go how I'm trying to achieve it in my own way. So this whole talk is about my personal experience, my personal approach, and it's all about how I have approached this subject, of course, using the philosophy of Elizabeth Van Borghese and many others along the way. So next slide now, please. So I want to introduce this extremely important picture. And I think most of you have seen this picture and known about this picture. This is known as the Earthrise picture. So Earthrise picture was taken by astronaut William Anders on the 24th of December, 1968. So you're talking about, almost 50, well, yeah, 54 years ago, 56 years ago, actually, almost 56 years ago this time on Apollo 8. And Galen Rowell, a very famous environmental photographer, an award-winning environmental photographer, has said that this was the most influential environmental photograph ever taken. And what Anders himself said about that picture is that we set out to explore the moon, and instead we discovered the Earth. So they actually went out to explore the moon, but they discovered the Earth. Now, when he says discovered the Earth, what he means is that when they saw this Earth, just like people have always seen sunrise and moonrise from the beginning of mankind, people have seen sunrise and moonrise. This is the first time any human being had seen the Earth rise. He was probably one of the first three people to see this Earth rise. And the other thing he saw was how blue the planet was. So that's the first time people recognized that it was not planet Earth really, but it was planet ocean. And that's the first recognition. And also it showed us, in comparison to the cosmos or in comparison to the universe, how tiny that Earth was. Because what he said was, if I put my thumb in front of the camera, I can obliterate the Earth. It is that insignificant as compared to the cosmos. So when we talk about us being great, the human beings great, or me being great, or somebody being great, if the earth itself is so insignificant, how insignificant we are. And that is what we have to recognize when we think in terms of what we are doing to the planet and how we can contribute our best ability to improve the situation on the planet. Next slide, please. So the first point that I want to make is one ocean. So if there's nothing else that you can take away from this talk, the one thing that you should take away is that there is only one ocean. And I'm going to give some examples as to how it is one ocean and how it is important to look at it as one ocean. So the first thing that you see on my website, if you go to my website, oceangovernance.org, the first landing page, it says that our whole thinking must change. Our whole thinking must change. So the idea, and I'll talk about what is that thinking, how the thought process of change comes about. The concept is of one ocean is crucial in everything what we do. Some people say that there are three oceans, right? There is Indian Ocean, there is Atlantic Ocean, there is Pacific Ocean. Some people might say that there are five oceans if you add Arctic and the Antarctic to it, or the Southern Ocean to it rather. Okay, and then you have the Indian Pacific and Atlantic. Some people might also say that there are seven oceans. So if you count the North and South Pacific and the Atlantic, then it becomes seven oceans. So that way, you are basically talking about 1, 3, 5, 7. So that's how the title of this talk comes. But there's only one ocean, and just as we have only one planet, there is only one ocean that we have. The Pacific, which is the largest ocean that we have, is larger than the surface of the area of Mars. Why I have said this? The reason I say it is that many people, particularly the rich billionaires on Earth, they are trying to find life on Mars. They are trying to go to the Mars. Nothing wrong with that, because it advances our scientific knowledge about the cosmos about the world that we live in. But they are trying to find life on Mars and spending billions of dollars to find life on Mars, while we are spending billions of dollars to destroy our own planet, which has a full life facility for us. So that is a critical thing. 5 moons, how big the Pacific is. 5 moons can be placed side by side across the Pacific. You can put 5 moons side by side across the Pacific, and there'll be still space left. So large is the width of the Pacific Ocean. Antipodes, which are the points opposite. So if you take a point on this side of the Earth, the exact opposite is called the antipode. So antipode just offshore of Chile and Peru are just offshore of Vietnam and China. So basically, if you have Chile and Peru on one side, and if you take a point there, it will reach the other side, which is Vietnam and China, and the entire hemisphere is the Pacific Ocean. That's how big the Pacific is. And all the continents on Earth can fit in the Pacific, which has 50% of all the water on the Earth. So that is how big the ocean is, and that is how the one single ocean, Pacific Ocean is. But I want to give you another view. Next slide, please. One ocean, another concept. It's called the Spillhouse projection. Most of us are used to seeing world maps in what we call as the Phillips projection or the Peter projection. But this is a different projection which came out actually just before this, just after the Second World War in 1948, just after our own independence for that matter. But this has become, suddenly it's come back into vogue now in the last 4 or 5 years. So if you check this Spillhouse projection, originally from 1942, it was by a German scientist, German-American rather, scientist. He was a geophysicist actually by profession, called Athelstan Spillhouse. So he lived from 1911 to 1998. And he was instrumental not only in this map, but he is a great man because he started in the US what is called as the Sea Grant College before in 1963. Prior to that, the US used to have what was called as the land grant colleges, so land grant universities. Now he started the Sea Grant universities to study the ocean in 1963. And he also, from 1957 to 1973, ran a program, a cartoon series called Our New Age, so to popularize science. So he was a great man in that respect. So now if you see this map, it is centered around the Antarctic. So the Antarctic is in the center, and the rest of the world is around the Antarctic. And you can see here is Africa, here is India, here is Southeast Asia, here is the United States, and so on. So the whole ocean, if you see Pacific, the Indian Ocean, and the Atlantic, they are all interconnected. And all the little oceans are also interconnected. So basically, all the sea, all the ocean is all interconnected. Not only that, all the rivers end up in the ocean. So even the rivers are connected to the ocean, and there's only one ocean, and there's only one single water body. So imagine that there is one single water body, and we have to look after it as such. Next slide, please. So I've said how big the ocean is. So the ocean is, as we learn in school books when we are in school, that the ocean is 71% of Earth's surface, but it offers 99% of living space. In terms of the biosphere, in terms of the depth of the ocean, and in terms of the life in the ocean, in all along the depth of the ocean, it is 99% of the living space on the Earth is offered by the ocean. The land to sea ratio, because we think, oh, there is lots of land, because we are all land-based people, so we don't get an idea of how big the ocean is. Land to sea to land area is 60 to 40 in the northern hemisphere. So even in the northern hemisphere, where much of the land is concentrated, much of our continents are concentrated, there the sea is still 60%, and it's only 40% in the northern hemisphere. But if you go into the southern hemisphere, it's even bigger. There's 80% of the sea and only 20% of land in the southern hemisphere. So the sea is all pervasive, really. Average depth of the sea is 3,700 meters, roughly. Average elevation on land is only 835 meters. The deepest point in the sea is 11,000 meters. The tallest mountain, or the tallest elevation, is Mount Everest at 8,849. So there's a 3,000-meter difference there. So the ocean is much deeper than the deepest point that you can find. Than the tallest point that we can find on Earth. The mid-oceanic ridge itself is 64,000 kilometers long, which is 4 times longer than all the mountain ranges on land combined. So if you combine all the Himalayas and Aral Mountains and all the mountains in the US, etc. If you combine all those mountain ranges, you have it's 4 times larger than that, and it is 2,000 kilometers wide. So 64,000 kilometers long and 2,000 kilometers wide. That's as big as how the mid-oceanic ridge is. It goes all around the Earth, all around the ocean. And 96.5% of all the water on the Earth is ocean. It's only the rest, sort of 3.5%, is ice on land, which is including all the ice that is inaccessible in the north and the southern poles. The groundwater, only part of it is accessible, not the deep water aquifer, rivers and lakes, and water in the atmosphere. So all that combined is only 3.5%. Next slide, please. So that was my point I was making about one ocean. So we have to treat it as one ocean, just as we have one planet, we have one ocean, and we have to look after it. Then my next point I want to make is about this concept of VUCA world. And Professor Acharya is a management person, and you would have heard about this term called VUCA. I heard first about it in 1983. And it basically says that we live in a VUCA world, which basically means that our world is signified by volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And the ocean is a classic example of that. Our Earth and the ocean are a very classic example of that. So we live in a VUCA world, and I want to come to the end of the talk. When I come to the end of the talk, I want to say how this VUCA, which is a negative, or what we sometimes can call as a vicious circle, because things are volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, so very difficult to manage. So ocean is similarly very difficult to understand and very difficult to manage. The environment is very difficult to understand and manage. And similarly, our planet is very difficult to understand and manage. So how can we turn that into a virtuous circle? And those are the steps we will be going through from now until almost the end of the talk. Next slide, please. So ABCD of challenges. Of course, you can have EFGH also of challenges up to Z, but I've just picked a few points here. Every challenge leads to opportunities, what I would like to say. The first is, of course, like I said in the beginning, the aim is to achieve equity, justice, and peace. And that can be only achieved by balancing people, planet, and profit. You know, that three-legged stool that I was talking about. And this will help us combat death, disease, and destruction. Death, disease, and destruction on the planet. So if you manage people, if you manage the planet properly, if you manage our prosperity in a way that it helps more people by achieving equity, justice, and peace, it will combat death, disease, and destruction that we see ever so rampant on our planet. And this will lead to the dividend. The dividends will be more countries will become democratic. More countries will become democratic. The demography will benefit, as many of you probably know, that India benefits from a demographic dividend, meaning that India has got a very young population. So come next 10, 20, 30 years, we will have many talented young people to support our economy and perhaps the economy of the rest of the world, because the rest of the world is aging, whereas we have a young population. And demand. There are a lot of products that people can make from the ocean, get from the ocean. And the more demand you have for this, the more people you have, the more democracy you have, the more demography you have. There is greater demand for everything good that you do. Anything good that you can achieve, there'll be a demand for it. Any good product you have, there'll be a demand for that. Next slide, please. So this brings me to my three approaches. So the one ocean, and now I come to three approaches. My first approach is what I call as advice. Advice is what I do for a living. So this happened around in 2002. Elizabeth Mann Borghese, my guru, and my friend, philosopher, and guide she was for 20 years. She died within 10 days of my father. So they both died in February. She died on the 8th of February. My father died on the 17th of February, 2002. So when that happened, I thought that I have been working in this area for almost 20 years at that time, or even somewhat longer. I thought that I would do something to pay tribute to my father and to Elizabeth Mann Borghese, because my father was a very good orator, and it was Elizabeth's philosophy that had moved me into this area of endeavor. So in December 2002, there was an event at Organised in Paris, at which I was invited to speak about Elizabeth's life and work, which later on became a tribute, which later on became also her obituary got published in the Ocean Yearbook that year, 2 years later. So when I came back and sat down after doing my talk, something came to my head, and I just wrote down 7 points on my a little piece of paper. And that's where the idea of 7 pillars of ocean and environmental governance was born. The title I have stolen from 7 Pillars of Wisdom, a very famous book by T.E. Lawrence. T.E. Lawrence being the Lawrence of Arabia. Many people would have seen the movie, and he was a great philosopher and writer. So he wrote this book called 7 Pillars of Wisdom. So I took from the title and I used it. Now this book is very unreadable, as some books are, same as the Brief History of Time by Stephen Hawking, which is also very difficult to read book. But I have simplified my 7 pillars of ocean and environmental governance, and we'll talk about that as we come next. My clients are anybody, basically educational and research institutions, intergovernmental and non-governmental organizations. So whoever will want to know or want to learn something about ocean and environmental governance and sort of educate their staff or students in that respect, I would talk to them. And this is what we call as continuing lifelong learning or continuing professional development, lifelong learning or continuous professional development. So I always say jokingly that I'll talk to anyone who will listen to me, and I'm grateful to you for listening to me. And advice is my vehicle for earning a living. So this is how I earn a living for almost the last 20 years or so. Next slide, please. The second one is advocacy. So this is where I talk about things that interest me beyond ocean and environmental governance, areas that are not necessarily related to ocean and environmental governance, but some things which are somewhat related but may not be related. So the first one is about moral duty to give. I always take this idea of Peter Singer, who is a very famous environmentalist. He's an Australian environmentalist currently working in the US at Yale University. And he talks of, this idea of our moral duty to give. Now, obviously, this is true also not just at corporate level or big business or wealthy people, but it is important at an individual level also, at whatever level you can do it. At national and international level, a voluntary and yet unfulfilled commitment of 0.7 of GDP to the Overseas Development Administration by the OECD countries was made in 1970. So all the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development countries, which are the 32 most developed countries in the world, they made an announcement voluntarily in 1970 that they will give 0.7% of their GDP to overseas development assistance. Now that has been an unfulfilled promise. If you take more recent promises, in 2015 in Paris Conference of Parties of Climate Change, they promised $100 billion per year for climate change related financing, but that has also not worked. But if it happens, if all developed countries give 0.7% of GDP, then that would work out to 400 billion annually. This compares, like I said, with another unfulfilled promise that was made to give 100 billion to climate change commitments. By contrast, now if you see, this is for overseas development assistance that I'm talking about and climate change assistance. By contrast, NATO countries spend an average of 2.5%, so more than 3 times their budget of their GDP for defense. So we are happy to spend 2.5%. Rich countries are happy to spend 2.5% of their GDP on defense, but they can't be committing to 0.7%. USA, which is the biggest donor, only about gives 0.1% of their GDP for overseas development assistance. Only I think about half a dozen countries, mostly from the Scandinavia, Japan, and 1 or 2 other countries, they have matched the 0.7% and maybe exceeded it somewhat. So this 400 billion or maybe 500 billion per year can service all the sustainable development goals. We are all aware of the 14 sustainable development goals. Plus, it can deal with death, disease, and destruction that I have talked to you about, and also natural disaster mitigation. And the other issue that I am very passionate about is universal basic income, that everybody should get a basic income so that their thoughts are focused on their future rather than looking at where my bread is coming for tonight or the next morning. It's very important to think about that. Next slide, please. And finally, it's the third approach is action. This is where I give to good causes. I'm very proud with the help of my wife and son that I have consistently given 10% of my gross income away since 2002. So my income may not be great and 10% of that may not be great, but that is some little contribution that we can make. And we can all do that. We can all help alleviate poverty, hunger, lack of education, shortage of water, lack of sanitation, provision of healthcare, and small amounts in any country will go a long way, contributing through volunteering, pro bono work, etc., etc. And so I've just given some examples, but that's not important. The important thing is to remember that to those that hunger, give bread. People who are hungry, you give bread to them. But those that have the bread, give them the hunger for justice. So that's what people must be looking for. People must be given the empowerment to seek justice in their own lifetimes. And each one of us has to be an agent of change. I'll come back to that a little bit later. Next slide, please. So why are we where we are? So this is Mahatma Gandhi once said that it is about wants and needs. Mahatma Gandhi famously said that there is enough in the world for the need of everybody, but not enough in the world for the greed or for the want of everybody. So there's this great dichotomy between want and need. Needs are limited, wants are unlimited. And that's where the whole problem starts. Just look at the mankind. Nothing is ever any good for us until we can cut, dig, or kill it. Think about it. Unless we cut a tree, it's no good for us. Unless we dig the earth and get the minerals out of it, the mineral is no good for us. Or unless we kill an animal, it is no good for us. So cut, dig, and kill is the way human beings work. Animals works the same way too, but they work within their ecological limits. We say that, oh, I have got one house, I want to have a second house and a third house, one car, second car, third car. So there's this great amount of greed that we have, and we want it for the next generation and our children and our grandchildren, etc. We should be looking at a better planet for our next generation and our children and grandchildren. But then, crucially, we added burn to it. So cut, dig, and kill. And in addition, now we have burn to it. So what has happened now? Our addiction to fossil fuel now means that our ppm of CO2 has gone up from 283 parts per million in 1800 to 313 in 1955, which is the year I was born. And within my own lifetime, that number has gone to 425. So imagine from 1800 to 1955, in 155 years, it only went up by about 30. But within my own lifetime of 69 years, it has gone from 313 to 425. So basically, this linear model that we have so far of take, make, use, and throw does not work. It has been shown that it doesn't work. So we have to have a circular model. So enough has to be done in terms of recycling, etc. Chemicals, heavy metals, industrial and municipal waste, plastics, etc. That they mean that humans have interfered inexorably with the biological ocean fluxes. And as a result, we have become a lawless society. So when I say lawless society, not necessarily in legal terms too, but we have become a landless, airless, and waterless society because our land is becoming less productive because of too many phosphates, fertilizers, and chemicals. Our air is becoming too unbreathable. See places like Delhi, etc. We can't breathe the air. So that's because of too much pollution, and our water is contaminated, and we are having shortage of water. So all these three things are happening at the same time. So we want to become from a lawless society, we want to turn into a lawful society. Next slide, please. So what are the existential issues facing us? So when COVID came a few years ago, we thought, my God, that was the end of the world. But I would compare COVID to small marbles, that children play with, small marbles. But then that is much smaller than a bigger issue, which is climate change, which I would compare it to a tennis ball, for example, which is even smaller than a bigger issue, much bigger issue, which is disruption of nitrogen cycle because of the use of too many chemicals, too many fertilizers, pesticides and chemicals, too much what you call nutrient loading. And the biggest problem we face today is loss of biological diversity. And I would compare that with a football. Now, you'll be surprised to know that of all the animals all the mammals in the world, I'm not talking about all the animals, I'm just talking about the mammals. Of all the mammals in the world, 60% are mammals that we breed or grow and nurture for meat and milk. 60%. 36% are us 8 billion human beings. Only 4% are all your other mammals such as elephants and tigers and giraffes and donkeys and whatever, monkeys and all that. So only 4%. So imagine how many animals, how many mammals were there and how plentiful they were, and we have reduced them to just 4%. 36% humans, 60% ranch animals, only for meat and milk production. So the biodiversity is lost, the number of animals is lost, the diversity of animals is lost. Planetary boundaries, if you see, Stockholm Resilience Center has produced several documents on this. 6 out of 9 boundaries are crossed already by 2024. So I have given some examples. Stern review. Stern used to be my professor, Nick Stern, Lord Stern now. He was my professor at LSE, and he has written a report called Economics of Climate Change. Kate Raworth has written an interesting book called Donut Economics, which talks about actually the planetary boundaries and how we can be contained within the within the donut rather than outside the donut. Dasgupta review. Partha Dasgupta, a famous economist at Cambridge University, has come out with the economics of biodiversity. So economics of climate change and economics of biodiversity by Lord Stern and Professor Dasgupta. And the IOC of UNESCO has come out with what is known as the State of the Ocean Report in 2024. Next slide, please. Now, why is the ocean significant for our survival? So that's my third issue. The Pacific alone, like I've said, is bigger than the surface of Mars and can accommodate all 7 continents. Now look at this dichotomy here. Only about 5% of the ocean has been explored and mapped. So that's a very small percentage. So we need to learn so much more about the ocean. As a result of which, Roger Revelle, a famous ocean scientist from Scripps Oceanographic Institution, which is part of University of California, San Diego, where a former fellow alumnus of mine, from my alma mater, Pradeep Khosla, is the chancellor. Roger Revelle said some years ago that we know more about the backside of the moon than the bottom of the ocean, because there are more people who have gone to the moon than there are 14 people who have gone to the moon, whereas only 3 people have gone to the bottom of the ocean. Inter alia, it absorbs 25% of carbon dioxide, generates 50 to 80% of oxygen. So basically 25% is absorbed by the ocean, 25% by the trees, by the forests, what we call the large forests of the earth, and generates 50 to 80%. So 2 out of every 3 breaths that we take is thanks to the ocean. It is 70% of Earth's surface that we know. It receives 80% of all land-based pollution and absorbs 90% of excess heat from emissions, carries 95% of world trade. We think that the world trade is carried by trains and ships and juggernaut trucks, etc. But no, it is not. It is carried by the ocean. So ocean carries 95% of world trade, contains 97% of Earth's water, and offers 99% of the biosphere. I've said that earlier. Also, what is happening now, I'm doing this talk and you are able to hear it from where you are. We call that, this internet communication that is happening. And we talk of the cloud and we say that, these things are stored up in the cloud or something like that. But the cloud is not in the sky. The cloud is actually below the ocean, in the ocean, given that 99% of all communication cables are laid under the ocean. So our fiber optics cables are all laid under the ocean, and 99% of communication happens as a result of that. And the next slide, please. So where in nature can we find simple solutions? Okay, these are the problems. So where can we find solutions? The solutions are staring us in the face, as Greta Thunberg famously says. Just as we need trillion new trees on land, there's a slogan now, TNT, trillion new trees. TNT is actually an explosive. As a mining engineer, I used to study TNT during my research projects at IIT Kharagpur. But I look at it a different way. I call it TNT as in trillion new trees. So we want an explosion of trees, trillion new trees on land. On the coastal side, mangroves, seagrass, and corals are our triple insurance against imminent climate catastrophe. So the more mangroves we have, the more seagrass we have further into the water, and corals we have a little bit more further into the water, then that will be our triple insurance against climate change. And things can be done. Even in deserts, you can have forests or you can create forests. There is a great project going on in Africa now, from Dakar to Djibouti, from the west of Africa to east of Africa, or east of Africa to west of Africa, whichever way you look at it. Dakar is in the west, Djibouti is in the east. And there's this great green wall project coming up, and trees are coming up at the border of Sahara Desert. And they are calling this the Great Green Wall. And this is happening for the last 10 years and continuing. And a good friend of mine, a graduate from IIT Kanpur, he has started in my own hometown here in Pune, not very far from the city, an organization called 14trees.org. And his basis is that all our lifetime of our breaths, the carbon dioxide that an individual emits, can be taken care of, can be compensated by 14 trees. So planting 14 trees per person would compensate for every single breath that you have taken. Next slide, please. So how must our narrative change? I talked about it, that our whole thinking must change. So it comes through our narratives. So how these narratives must change? The ocean is too big to fail. That was our first narrative. So and so is the planet too big to fail. So basically what all our ancestors, including us, up until the middle of even last century, until 1973, 72 to be precise, or 1982 in case of the ocean policy. Environmental policy started in 1972 with the Stockholm Conference. It was called the United Nations Conference on Human Environment. And the ocean policy really started in the true sense with the Law of the Sea Convention in 1982. But before that, at least till after the Second World War, the idea was that the ocean or the planet is too big to fail. You can do whatever with it. You can take as much fish you want. You can throw as much rubbish in the ocean as you like. You can do whatever you want with it, and it will not be damaged. But then we found out in the later years, after 1950, that things were actually becoming bad for the ocean and for the environment. So then we realized the ocean is not too big to fail. We failed the ocean. We failed the ocean. The oceans didn't fail. The environment didn't fail. We failed the ocean. We failed the environment. So then the next narrative came. The next narrative was the ocean is too big to fix. So yes, the damage is done, and now we can't do anything about it. We just threw our hands up in the air and we said, sorry, we have done the damage. Sorry to the future generation. Sorry for what we have done. But this is what it is. We can't fix it. But then the correct narrative. So both these narratives are not correct. The correct narrative is the ocean is too big to ignore, and the planet is too big to ignore, and we ignore it at our own peril. So we have to do something continuously to make the ocean better, to make the environment better. Next slide, please. So then I come to the 7 solutions, which I call the 7 pillars of ocean and environmental governance. So the first pillar, obviously, is science and technology. And when I say science and science technology, it is not just natural sciences. It is not just physics, chemistry, mathematics, biology, geology, etc. It is also social sciences. Social sciences are equally important. So natural and social sciences and applied science, which we call as technology. So it is all about seeking knowledge and acquiring wisdom. I call science knowledge and wisdom is technology. What we do with science is technology. So it's a double-edged sword. Science creates problems. Science and technology create problems, but they also provide solutions. Science is about imagination. As Einstein said, that imagination is more important than knowledge, because knowledge is limited, imagination is unlimited. And also, D.H. Lawrence, the famous novelist, he talked about dreams. And he said that don't dream dreams that will let you sleep. Don't dream when you're asleep, but dream dreams that won't let you sleep. And I think our former president, APJ Abdul Kalam, also had something similar to say. And he said that do not just dream dreams when you're sleeping, but dream dreams during a daytime, which will not let you sleep at night until you fulfill the dreams, of course. And of course, the World Intellectual Property Organization has this motto called Imagine, Think, Create. So only when you can imagine and think, then you can create new things. So science and technology can lead us to create new solutions. My guru used to talk about utopians of today are realists of tomorrow. Realists of today are dead tomorrow. So you have to be a utopian so that you will be a realist 50 years from now. People will remember you as a great thinker or great revolutionary. Next slide, please. The second solution is geopolitical economy. Whose resources and who benefits? Most of the times we see that resources are somewhere and beneficiaries are somewhere else. Even in India, if you see the richest, the states that are richest in natural resources are are the poorest in India. Okay. That is true in most countries. Africa, which has got the most resources, is the most poor region. So that is true in many parts. Then carbon trail from production to consumption to waste, recycling, and residue. So this is a carbon trail from every stage of our life, our cycle of production. So whether you produce something, you produce waste. You consume something, you produce waste. When you recycle, then you produce waste, and then finally the residue is left. So there is a linear. This is what you call as a linear model, and we have to change that into a circular model to the extent possible. What happens most of the times is privatization of profits and socialization of costs. So when people have benefits, people make profits, they keep the money. But when things go wrong, then they tell the government, oh, my business is going down, please save me. I'll give you simple examples, like people have farms, people have, let's say, cows. And when the cows are giving a lot of milk, you're making profits, you make the profit and you keep the money. And you, in fact, buy more cows. But when the cows may perhaps die of some disease, then you go to the government, then you go to the local authorities and say, oh, can you rescue me from this problem? And then, of course, transboundary nature of impact. So no longer the impacts are within the boundaries of nation states. The transboundary nature of impacts is increasingly evident. Pollution is causing international problems. Natural disasters are causing international problems, and epidemics. COVID is a very, very good example of that. Herman Daly, a World Bank economist, famously says that economy is a wholly owned subsidiary of the environment, not the reverse. So economy will only thrive if the environment thrives, not the other way around. If the economy thrives, not necessarily that environment will do well. Next slide, please. Then the third one is institutions or organizations. We want to set up democratic institutions as far as possible and have the system of voting genuinely and not veto. So UN and EU are working towards that. Winston Churchill famously said that democracy is the worst form of government except all the others that we have tried. And our own Prime Minister, he said some time ago that moving out of file, bureaucracy, and moving into life, which is governance, less government and more governance. Everybody says that. All the well-known philosophers, political philosophers say that there should be less government and more governance. But does it really happen? We have to check. The beauty of democracy is that it somehow creates an ecosystem of checks and balances. And at least it should do so. It doesn't do always, but it should do so. So that's the third solution. Next slide, please. Legislation and implementation. Don't legislate what you can't implement is the golden rule of legislation. Continuous development, periodic review, and uniform application of the rule of law. So you have to get rid of the old laws. You have to develop laws continuously. You have to get rid of laws that are redundant. You have to create new laws based on new knowledge, new science and new technology that we have created, and we have to create new laws. There were no internet laws 50 years ago or 25 years ago. Now we have got internet laws. So those kind of things, intellectual property laws, etc., etc. So you have to continuously develop these things. In fact, my alma mater has a school probably set up by Professor Acharya on intellectual property law, Rajiv Gandhi School of Intellectual Property Law. Peremptory norms, or what are known as jus cogens. Pollution is a crime against environment, just as genocide is a crime against humanity. So slowly, environmental lawyers are now coming into this frame of mind where we say that this is a peremptory norm or jus cogens as far as law says. Then we are talking about exhortative principle, do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. So we tell that to the politicians, we tell that to the lawmakers, etc. And then shifting from crime and punishment, because the older principle was if somebody commits a crime, punish them. But now we are saying find ways of how people cannot commit the crime, environmental crime. I'm not talking about other crimes, I'm talking about environmental crimes. So from the sic utere tuo principle, which is preventing crime to be committed in the first place by saying that primum non nocere. So the idea is that we are shifting from the crime and punishment scenario to precautionary principle, so that we do not come into a situation where people damage the environment and they are punished. Rather than that, we find ways in which they will stop the damage in the first place. And moving from being lawless to lawful. So lawless, as I said, was land, air, and water, and we want our lands to be more productive, our air to be more breathable, and our water to be more potable. Next slide, please. And then, of course, role of civil society is very important. What is the role of civil society? We are all part of civil society. Everybody is part of civil society. Stakeholders, women and youth. Women are 50% of the world, and youth will reside in that world in the future. So very important. These are the two top stakeholders, according to the United Nations definition of stakeholders. We all talk of rights, but what about responsibility? We say, oh, I should get this, I should do that, I should get that. But what should I do? The famous quote by Kennedy, where he says, ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country. And that's very important. Corporate social responsibility, that's all very good. But what about individual social responsibility? Yes, corporate should do this, that, and the other. But what about you? How can you help your own society? Principle 10 of Rio Declaration of Agenda 21 in the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development in 1992 in Rio, it says that environmental issues are best handled by participation of all concerned citizens. So we have to involve the civil society. Next slide, please. And then finally, financial initiatives. Where do you get the money for doing the things that you want to do? How do you get the money to get? So there are various initiatives, public-private partnerships, private finance initiatives, foreign direct investment, and there are many banks and regional banks which give loans without or credit sometimes, loans and credit sometimes for environmental issues. It is important to remember that enterprises do stuff to make money. Environmentalists need money to do stuff. So people who are working in my profession, they need money to do the things that they want to know. Not me particularly, because I'm straight away into just environmental education and training. So I don't need any money. All I need is a blackboard and chalk, or an internet connection and a computer. So, but a lot of the environmental stuff needs doing, and that needs money. And finally, of course, next slide, please. Education and awareness. This is my central pillar. Each one of us belongs to at least one pillar, one of the 7 pillars, and can adopt it as their central pillar. Education, both at formal and informal level. From my guru, Elizabeth Mann-Borghese, used to talk about from age 8 to 80. This is when she was 60. So I asked her once, why do you say 8 to 80? So she said 8 is the age where little animals become human beings. When you are born, we are no different than little animals. But when you are 8 years old, you start understanding things. Your brains start to understand things. So that's why 8. And then I asked why 80, and she said she was around 60 then, and she said that when you look at yourself, you think that other people are old only when they are 20 years older than you. So, for example, now I'm 69 and I don't consider myself to be old, but I consider somebody who is probably in their 90s, like my mother, I consider her to be old. So that was a general idea of 8 to 80. Then, of course, I mentioned mid-career training, continuing professional development, or lifelong learning. Every professional needs to be trained. All of us need to be trained. Whatever age we are, doesn't matter. We have to be continuously learning. Especially politicians have to be trained also. And I'm very glad that I have played my part in educating politicians, not just in England, but also at the European Union level in many fora. Facilitation of stakeholder dialogues, bringing together people, different professions. And education, of course, I think that it's a gift that does not diminish on giving. Instead, it's a gift that keeps on growing as you give it away. Baba Dioum, a very famous environmentalist from Senegal, he said that in the end, we will protect only what we love only what we understand, and understand only what we are taught. So there's this great link between what you are taught and what you will protect. So education awareness can bring about all the changes you need in the universe. Next slide, please. So I told you about the world that we live in, or the ocean that it is, which is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. But if you adopt some of these ideas, if you adopt some of these approaches and solutions, then you have a positive VUCA rather than a negative or a vicious VUCA. We have a virtuous VUCA, and the VUCA is through vision, through understanding, through clarity, through clarity and through agility. Next slide, please. And finally, I've almost come to the end of my talk, but I want to say a few things by way of optimism, And I asked once my guru, how can she be so optimistic? She was ever so optimistic about everything. So she told me that the optimism is not about celebration. The optimism is about something that pushes you every day to get up the next morning to do something better, to do something more useful, to do something that will contribute to whatever little extent to the betterment of the ocean, the environment, the society, etc. So I've got these words from a very popular song by Rolling Stones, written by Mick Jagger. Some of you who might understand rock music. So this song says, you can't always get what you want. You can't always get what you want, but if you try sometime, you will find that you get what you need. So again, this idea of want versus need. So whether you pick your hero, basically, whether your hero is Mick Jagger or Michael Jackson. Mick Jagger wrote this song about want and need. Michael Jackson sang a song about the earth song. What have we done to our earth? Very popular rock song. Or Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi also talked about need or want. Doesn't matter who is your hero or who is your, poster boy or whatever. This is what is important. You have to find out the distinction between want and need and focus on the needs. Wants are unlimited, needs are limited. The next thing I say is our whole thinking must change. I have talked about it. Our narratives have to change. And the change must come from within. And the change can only come from within through education and awareness. It cannot come by somebody pushing you, somebody forcing you, saying, Sunil, you must do this. Then probably Sunil will not do it. But if Sunil is told why it is important to do it through education, through awareness, then it is more likely that Sunil will do it. So the change must come from within. Then each one of us has got to be an agent of change. We cannot say that, oh, somebody else will do things for us. We have to make a start somewhere. And we must do the right thing because it is the right thing to do, not because it is a populist thing to do, not because it will make you more money, not because it will make you more popular, but because it is the right thing to do. And I want to give a somewhat unrelated example. And it is three statements here. It says the world is awful, the first statement. The second statement says the world is better. And the third statement says the world could be even better. So these are three statements, and all of them are true at this point in time. And this is quite an unrelated example. So let me tell you what the example is. The world is awful. Right from the beginning of mankind until about 1950, 50% of all children that were born died before the age of 15. 50% of all children that were born died before their own reproductive age, before the age of 15. Now that percent worldwide within the last 75 years has come down to 5%. Would you imagine? From 50% of children, all children dying, it's only 5% of the children now die before the age of 15 worldwide. The world could be even better. If you see the European Union, if you see the 28 European countries, we sadly left, the United Kingdom sadly left the EU. But if you include UK, it's 29. But even if you take the 28 European Union countries, that percentage has now come down to 0.5% there. So from 50% all children dying worldwide, it went down to 5% for the whole world and 0.5% for the European Union. So what I want to say here is things can be done. Positive things can be done. And even the so-called impossible things can be done if we put our minds to it. And I also talk about what is known as a pin diagram. positions that we take are intransigent, but the issues are common. Issues are all common to everybody, and the needs are even more. In fact, they are same. We used to talk about food, clothing, and shelter. Everybody needs food, clothing, and shelter, whether you are a poor pauper or a multi-billionaire. Everybody needs food, shelter, and clothing. So our needs, our basic needs are the same. And we have to also have what is known, what I call as honesty of purpose and clarity of purpose. Unless we have those two things, we cannot achieve anything. And finally, I want to end by telling a story about a young boy, the beach, and the starfish. So there is a young boy walking on the beach on a hot day, and the beach is strewn with starfish. And the starfish will be burning to death. They'll be boiling to death because of the high temperature and the hot beach. So what this boy is doing, he is picking up a starfish, one starfish at a time, and throwing it in the water on the beach. The old man is walking by and he says, "Young man, what are you doing?" So he picks up another starfish and throws it into the sea and says, "I'm saving the starfish." So the old man tells him, "But the beaches of the world are strewn with millions of starfish. How can you save them all?" So he again bends down and picks up another starfish and throws it in the sea. And he says, "I have changed the life for that one." And that has got to be our approach. We cannot be, bogged down by feeling that, oh, there's so much to be done and how can I do it? No, each one of us has to do our little bit and achieve things. So that is my final thought. In the end, I want to share with you, next slide, please. 10 solutions to reverse climate change. So these are the things that some of us can adopt in our life, either through individually or maybe collectively through government action or through industrial, approaches. So refrigerator management, wind turbines, but they should be offshore, not offshore. Offshore wind turbines have got lots of their own problems, preferably onshore. Reduced food waste. It has been known, or it has been studied, that almost 50% of all food that is produced is wasted, right? Coming from the farm to the fork, as they say, from the farm to your table. Between that, almost 50% of the food is wasted at various levels. Adoption of plant-rich diet, so cut down on meat and go for plant-rich diet. Tropical forest restoration, educating girls is extremely important. Family planning is extremely important. Solar farms, because country like India, for example, there's no reason why we can't have more solar farms. In fact, when I met Professor Acharya, one of my mining students was, in fact, I taught him briefly, 1984 graduate, Sanat Mishra. He runs a big solar firm in Bhubaneswar itself. Silvo pasture, having grazing lands and forests together, and rooftop solar. So those are top 10 solutions according to researchers to reverse climate change or the impacts of climate change. Next slide, please. So let me say by saying that it is not the end of the problem, but the solutions must begin somewhere. So when I talk about when I give this whole talk, I'm not just suggesting that what I have done or what I propose or what I have learned from Elizabeth Mann Borghese and through my own career is the end of the problem, or I'm suggesting solutions for the end of the problem. But we have to make small beginnings somewhere, and only then we can reach the end. Next slide, please. So many thanks for listening. My logo is there. You can see there. My contact email is there. My WhatsApp number is there, and my website address is there. And I thank you very much for listening to me. And I'm happy to take any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Sunil, for your excellent talk. It was really motivating and absorbing.
Thank you, sir.
Took us actually from mundane things to much, bigger things in life and for the humanities. Okay. Now, if there are any questions, Madam, actually conduct Q&A.
Certainly. There's no question in the chat box. I will invite the guest and audience. They can put up the questions to esteemed speaker today.
But what about our Sanat Kumar ji? Is he not there today?
The PK Mishra sir is there. Sanat sir, I think is no sir. Sir is not there this time.
Let them. Any question?
Shibani, do you have any question? The presentation was very lucid, so
Thank you.
there's
Then now you can propose a vote of thanks.
okay. So, good evening to one and all present over here. On behalf of INAE Bhubaneswar chapter, SOA University, CSIR Bhubaneswar, IIT Bhubaneswar, NISER Bhubaneswar, and IEEE Bhubaneswar subsection. I take this opportunity to express our heartfelt gratitude to all those who have made this 49th lecture of our distinguished lecture series a grand success. First and foremost, I extend my deepest thanks to our esteemed speaker, Professor Sunil Muralidhar Shastriji, a distinguished consultant, educator, and speaker in ocean and environmental governance. His insightful lecture on One Ocean, 3 Approaches, 5 Issues, 7 Solutions has provided us with profound knowledge and practical perspectives on pressing challenges and potential solutions for sustainable ocean governance. Sir, your expertise and accurate presentation has undoubtedly enlightened us and inspired the future discussion in this particular critical area. A heartfelt thanks to all the dignitaries, academicians, researchers, and the students who have joined us today. Your participation will definitely would have enriched you. And finally, I extend my gratitude to the chairman and the Bhubaneswar chapter, Professor Damodar Acharya, for arranging such a wonderful lecture, and all the collaborating institutes, including Shiksha Anusandhan Dimdim University and various other institutions, for their unwavering support in fostering knowledge-sharing platform like this lecture series. Thank you all once again, and looking forward for your continued participation in future lectures. Thank you. Have a great evening. Jai Hind. Namaste.
Thank you so much, Sunilji.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So please convey my regards to Madam.
We'll do. Yes, we'll do. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
We'll remain in touch.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, we'll remain in touch. I'm going to England now on the 12th of December.
13th of December.
No,